The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Welcome back to Ribble Valley again, everybody, for round 4. Now, those views that you saw at the end of the Mellor episode yesterday, well, they do continue on into this parish if you cross the boundary, but we're not going to really see much of them in this particular one because most of this one is all residential and it's got some interesting street names. This is Ramsgreave. Ramsgreave, Ramgrove. Yesterday we left off our journey through Ribble Valley at the Spread Eagle pub after a great little walk around the parish of Mellor. Between Mellor and Blackburn there's a parish by the name of Ramsgreave and the pub sits right on its western boundary. There can be no denying the view up there is immense. It's a hill though, it will be. Today we're having a look at what's in the valley below that hill, and the answer is a place with something of a sporting heritage. As a result of constant boundary changes in the 20th century, Blackburn Rugby Club currently span the border of the parish, with pitches being located in both Ramsgreave and Blackburn. They're separated by a small brook. The village also briefly hosted Ramsgreave Rugby League Club too, which played on the Pleckgate Municipal Recreation Grounds between 1998 and 2004. For the most part though, all of the rugby played on the pitches near Ramsgreave is outside the parish boundary. Within it there's far less of interest. Ramsgreave is the only built-up area in Ribble Valley's only designated slice of greenbelt land. As a result, most of the parish is exactly that, open countryside. That means there are only 2.5 miles of road here, but more than 6 miles of footpaths crisscrossing the landscape. It's far more rural than its proximity to Blackburn would suggest. An area of new build housing does exist close to Ramsgreave, but legally it cannot encroach into the greenbelt. What's left is a small collection of houses, a Roman road and a railway station. Let's go and see them. To get into Ramsgreave, we have to first drive there from the Spread Eagle pub. Most of Ramsgreave parish is dedicated greenbelt land, the only such area of its kind in the Ribble Valley. This has massive advantages as well as a few disadvantages to the local area. One good thing is that no new builds can legally be created here. Well, that's the theory anyway. Greenbelt land law is in the UK governed by the National Planning Policy Framework, or NPPF for short. Its main aim is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping greenbelt land open and permanently undeveloped. Greenbelt law is a grey area, but here in Ramsgreave it would appear it's largely being upheld. For miles and miles around there are no new developments. All you'll see is the countryside and a collection of buildings that have been here for centuries. One such property is Ramsgreave Hall. Ramsgreave Hall was a manor house built between 1805 and 1807 by John Francis Butler. It was later enlarged but demolished in 1931 by the Blackburn Corporation. However, the site is still in use. In 1943, a crematorium and a brand new cemetery were built where the hall once stood. That too has now gone, but today what remains is the Little Achievers Forest School. So this is Ramsgreave. It's a funny old place. Located on a hillside northwest of Blackburn, it consists of a handful of streets which adjoin the main road running up to the top of the hill and the parish boundary with Mellor. Ramsgreave was an area associated with handloom weaving. In fact, many of the houses that occupy the modern village, if you can call it that, are indeed properties in which weavers would have once lived. There are of course newer ones now. Most of the weavers' cottages were on the main drag. If you look at OS maps dating from 1900, you'll notice two streets that have rather interesting and unusual names. At the western end is one of them. This street is called Isle of Man. This is named after the original buildings that stood here before any other house was constructed. They were literally called Isle of Man cottages. Now, unfortunately, I have no idea how or why the island in the Irish Sea has this connection to Ramsgreave. Perhaps they were once occupied by former islanders, who knows? Whilst this might remain something of a mystery to me, I did find out the story behind the other street with a weird name further down the hill. We'll get to that in a bit. To the south of the main road, which runs towards a railway station at the bottom of the hill, is an area of newer streets constructed in the early 1900s. These are Mayfield Road, Moorfield Avenue and Glengreve Avenue. All three are totally residential, and given the existence of the Greenbelt land in Ramsgreave, these are still to this day among the newest properties in the parish. Ramsgreave has no church, no shops and no amenities of note. Mind you, it doesn't really need any. It's effectively a suburb of Blackburn, and it's within walking distance of Brownhill, where there's an array of shops and pubs and other stuff on the A666. So you get the idea with this one, it's very residential, isn't it? It's effectively a small suburb on the northern fringes of Blackburn, so it's not really very village-like. It doesn't have many sort of villagey type features, but it does have a few things of interest, and one of those is a railway station that's right on the boundary between this and another parish, which I'll cover in a later run. Let's head towards that now. We're going to continue down this street, which is all terraces, and then take a right turn at the end, and the station is in the dip, basically at the foot of the hill. Now we're at the bottom of the hill where the A666 comes into view. If you stand on this bridge, you'll see a railway line, and Ramsgreave has a railway station. Let's check it out. It's called Ramsgreave and Wiltshire because it sits at the point where the two parishes meet each other. Ramsgreave and Wiltshire is on the Ribble Valley line, which starts in Manchester, continues through Blackburn and ends up at Hellifield in North Yorkshire. Most services on the line only go as far as Clitheroe, but a minority run the full length of the route. Ramsgreave and Wiltshire is the first station north of Blackburn. Its present site is 400 yards south of the original station which served the village. That was Wiltshire Station, which closed just before the Beeching Axe fell in 1962. When the line was reopened in 1994, a new site had to be found for a station due to the construction of houses on the old one. Mind you, the platforms which served the old Wiltshire station can still be seen today. At the station you can see an art project called Along the Line. It was developed by Connecting East Lancashire in partnership with CRL, Child Action Northwest, Ribblesdale High School, Blackburn College and the Alzheimer's Society. The artwork was unveiled virtually on Tuesday the 19th of January 2021. Well, the old Wiltshire station hasn't been forgotten here in Ramsgreave, because if you look closely as you come down onto platform, I think this is platform 1, you'll see there's a mural that runs all the way around these fence posts, all the way down to the platform. Let's have a read of it, because it mentions the old station. When I was growing up, I lived close to the old train station in Wiltshire. My back garden backed onto the railway line. I was so used to the sound of the passing trains that I never really noticed them. I left school at 15 and became an apprentice electrician at John Walsh's in Blackburn. We used to do all the large-scale electrical work in the mills and factories. I used to travel to work every day on the train. I left the company when I was time served at 21 and went out on my own, still travelling by train to jobs, lugging all my tools around with me. I have no idea who wrote that, but that's a lovely little anecdote about someone who used to catch the train just up there, because that is where the old station was. And this, of course, is the new station, the modern station, where you can catch a train that goes to Blackburn in that direction, and Manchester, of course, or to Clitheroe in the other. Okay, it seems that that's only half the story, because there's also another mural on the way back up from platform 2, and this kind of tells you, I think, who wrote this. Born in 1922, Phyllis started working at the age of 14 in a factory that made shirts and pyjamas, mostly running around doing the more energetic tasks. Phyllis became a land girl at the age of 17, together with her older sister. She doesn't remember where they were sent to work, just that it was rural. Two memories from this time were harvesting potatoes and working alongside Italian prisoners of war. After meeting her husband, who was in the Air Force, and having a child, Phyllis worked for a number of years in a mill, making slippers. She also worked at a factory, sewing trims and edgings for furniture upholstery. Eventually became a supervisor there. Throughout the years, she always made her own clothes and clothes for her son, including knitting his socks. When Phyllis was made redundant, she used her redundancy money to buy a hardware shop with a flat up above. The shop was in a small collection of shops that made up the local high street, with a post office, a wool shop and a sweet shop. Phyllis finally retired at the grand old age of 94. That's a great innings, isn't it? This is Paris, and it certainly doesn't resemble the French capital. Mind you, after a bit of research, its name seems rather apt. This is a quiet enough row of former hand-loom weavers' cottages, which were built in 1841 and 42. They became known as Paris houses, or Little Paris, thanks to their other purpose. Famously known as the City of Love, in those days Paris was seen as a very promiscuous place. It was full of women who were, shall we say, willing to sell themselves to anyone who fancied the chances. You can fill in the rest yourself, I'm not drawing diagrams here. Paris Houses, or Little Paris's association with the naughty French capital, came about because the women living here, many of whom were married, supplemented their income from weaving by engaging in, well, a second job. You know, the sort that's part-time and totally flexible. Oh god, this is just getting worse. Eventually, Little Parish just became Paris after the prefix had been dropped by the time of the 1851 census. I wonder how many of the people living here now know what went on in their houses 150 odd years ago. If you live in one of these, what can I say? You're welcome for the information. After walking back up the hill, we returned to the Isle of Man. I can't imagine the cottages here would have had the same use. Was the Isle of Man a haven of promiscuity? I don't know. Anyway, we've made it around Ramsgreave, so all that remains is to drive past the station and into the next parish over. That's a steep hill, let me tell you, up from the railway station. But we're back at Isle of Man and we have finished the walk around Ramsgreave. But of course, we're not quite done with this just yet, because as I said at the beginning, this area has got something of a sporting heritage. Blackburn Rugby Club, to be precise. Here's a bit about them. Now, at the top of this video, I mentioned the sporting heritage of the Ramsgreave area and its association with rugby. Blackburn Rugby Club partially play within the parish. It's a strange setup because the parish boundary runs through their ground, meaning one pitch is within Ramsgreave and the other isn't. In 1877, the club was founded in what was, and still is today, a soccer-mad area. Some of its early history is a little vague due to newspaper records having been destroyed by fire, but there is hard evidence of games against such teams as Preston Rovers back then. In living memory, it was thought that the club had been reformed in 1921, but after dedicated research from one Michael Green, it was proven Blackburn has had continuous rugby since 1877. Before he did so, the club celebrated what it thought was its Jubilee year in 1971, before the Rugby Union accepted his evidence. As a result of that, there was a centenary match in 1977, 6 years after the Jubilee. In both games, the team had the same first 15 captain, the late and much lamented Ted Cooper. Blackburn used various grounds in their formative years, including one at Ewood, the home these days of Blackburn Rovers Football Club. In 1920, the club settled at Yellow Hills near to the Clog and Billycock pub, which was used as their changing room. In 1932, the members purchased the land on which the club now sits at Ramsgreave. A wooden hut was added as a clubhouse, which survived with its interior decoration of a bison's head until a new clubhouse was opened in 1964. Since the late 1960s, the pitches have been drained, further land has been added, and an extension has been built with the help of lottery money. 10 years ago, with the aid of a rugby union loan, they were able to redesign and refurbish their clubhouse. That's it for Ramsgreave. Tomorrow we'll be hitting a place which is made up of at least 3 little hamlets which have all joined together to form a modern parish. We'll also, after talking about it all week, get to see the River Ribble for the first time on TVI. Join me there, folks, as we wrap up this Ribble Valley run. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.